Welcome to Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by area realtor Jim York and York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information about the local real estate market, featuring leading experts in the real estate field.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. Today with our host Jim York and his guest Dwight Brock, Collier County Clerk of Courts.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Well, Mr. Brock, thank you for coming on again this year.
Not a problem, Mr. York. I enjoy coming on.
So the viewers that maybe haven't seen you, but probably everybody knows about you, is tell us a little bit about your background and the clerk's background.
Well, the clerk of the circuit court, I like to refer to it as the people's check and balance on local government. And it's a separate set of eyes on what the court does. And it is a check and balance through finances with county government. The clerk's office is the accountant, the auditor, and the custodian of county funds. The obligation of the clerk with regard to that is we prepare the financial records for the county. We prepare all of the statements that are audited by the external auditors. We use those when we go out to borrow money for the county. In addition to that, we are the custodian of all of the taxpayers' money. I mean, we have the money in a bank account. We don't make the decision as to how to spend it. That is done by the Board of County Commissioners. But the clerk's role in that process is we have to audit those expenditures. And if those expenditures are not lawful, we don't get what it is that we are supposed to be getting. And that all of the things that are done are in conformance with the law, we're not to write the check. The check cannot be written without it being signed by the clerk. So that process is the check and balance that was created by our forefathers in our Constitution on local government. You think about state and federal government, you have the tri-parties. You have the legislative, the executive, and the judicial that are supposed to be checks and balances on one another. Whether or not that is working effectively these days, I'll leave that to others' opinion. But, you know, our forefathers here in Florida decided through our Constitution that we needed a check on local government, and they created the clerk's office for that. In addition to that, the clerk keeps all of the court records associated with the trial courts here in Collier County. We do all the financial information relating to those courts. We collect the fines, we collect the fees associated with it, and we distribute it to the state or wherever else the state tells us to distribute those monies. We collect the fines from the people after the courts have imposed the penalties. We have a full role relating to the courts, and about half of my staff works in the court function, and about half works in the local government accounting, auditing, and finance and custodian function. The thing that is unique, I guess, to a certain extent about me, I was a prosecutor for 11 years here in Collier County. I mean, some of you may have had an opportunity to see on these news programs the Stephen Wayne Benson pipe bomb murder case that occurred here in Collier County. My brother and I were the two prosecutors that prosecuted that a few years ago. My role predominantly with the state attorneys for the little less than 11 years that I was there was as a white-collar crime prosecutor. And I'm both a CPA and an attorney. So, you know, my background, my educational background is very well suited for the role of the clerk. I love what I do. I believe that it's a very important role for the people, that we have that independent checks and balances in the clerk's office. I've been here a long time, and chances are probably pretty good this may be my last term, but we'll wait and see whether that's the case.
Well, you were just reelected last year,
That's
which
correct.
was nice. I know that from people that we've sent down there, you have an open door policy, and
That is correct.
your employees are very accessible and very helpful. So before we go into our topic today about foreclosures and tax deeds, in previous shows you mentioned that when you started, how many employees you have, and today how many employees you have? You've
We had
streamlined a lot.
280 something when we started back in 1992, and today we have about 180 something. We have reduced our workforce appreciably, and through the use of technology and through the necessity that everybody keeps cutting our funding, we have managed to keep up. But things are getting tough. You know, we have been pounded on pretty hard by the Florida legislature in the budgeting process for the court side of the operation. And, you know, if something doesn't happen pretty soon, we're going to be underwater here, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, that's the first subject in our first segment here. I'd like to talk about foreclosures and, you know, what happens from the start to the finish for
We'll go
people, and if somebody wants to purchase one, we want to talk about that too.
We will go from start to finish. You know, you buy a piece of property, you go to a lender, the lender loans you money, and in that process, the lender creates a note, which is a personal obligation between you and the lender, and also a mortgage. And a mortgage is a security interest in the realty or the real estate. And you pay for a while or you don't pay for a while.
Right.
And when you're not paying, what happens is the lender, through legal action, seeks to, one, enforce that note, and two, make a claim in that security interest in that mortgage by foreclosing on the property and having it sold to settle the debt. Okay. So your lender, your bank, whatever it may be,
Right.
could be a purchase money mortgage that you have a private individual that's selling the property is giving you the money, whatever it is. They all enforce that lien through that foreclosure process. Once they file the complaint, there's 20 days in which everybody gets an opportunity to respond. That is from the date that you were served. Most mortgages, because properties generally have a lot of different claims on the property, and they will have different priorities, is what it's called. For instance, the first mortgage will probably have the primary priority.
That's right.
Second mortgage will have the secondary. Your condominium fees, that will be in there somewhere after probably those two, or
That's
somewhere around there.
Yep.
And then there could be all sorts of, you could have judgments, there's all sorts of things that could have an interest in that real property. And all of those people will need to be named. One of the things that everybody should be concerned about the foreclosure action, especially if you are a lender, is to make sure that everybody in that process gets named.
That's right.
Because if they don't, they're not subject to the decisions of the court, because the court has never obtained jurisdiction over them. So you need to ensure that all of the people that have an interest are included in that mortgage foreclosure. Once that mortgage foreclosure is served on all of the parties that have an interest in that property, then everybody has an opportunity to respond or to enter a response to the court. That has to be filed. If you do not respond, then generally what will happen is after that 20 days lapses, the plaintiff, or the party that had loaned the money and is filing the foreclosure action, will move to have the clerk enter a clerk default, which means no documentation was filed within the 20 days. And at that point in time, the clerk will enter a clerk default against only that party that didn't answer.
Right.
You'll have some that answer and some that don't. For example, because of the way child support is enforced in Florida, I'm named in almost every foreclosure action that gets filed. I'm named in all of them where there is child support involved.
Right, yeah.
Right. And I generally don't respond to them. So I am defaulted, that's what it's called, default, out of the case most of the time. And they proceed without me. But at least I was named.
That's right.
So there's not an interest that I can come back and fight against later on.
Right, that's
Okay?
true.
So that's the general process of starting it. Okay? Once that occurs, the people who had the clerk's default issued for them, they will then generally, the plaintiff will go to the court and ask for a court default, a judgment, default judgment. And that will resolve the interest against the party that didn't respond. And all of the other parties then will begin their action in answering why they shouldn't be forfeited, their interest shouldn't be forfeited out of the process, and all of those things goes through. Okay? At the same time that complaint is filed, there's a document which is called a les pendants,
Right.
which is filed in the official records, which indicates that there is an interest being claimed by the party that is filing the les pendants. And that's always there, so you can go in and look and see if there's a les pendants on that property. But the case then proceeds. And generally what happens is there will be motions heard. Most of the time you have a motion for summary judgment, which means that there's no dispute of facts. One party is alleging there's no dispute of facts, and as a consequence, the judge can make the determination based upon the law without having anything else happen. If that occurs, then the judge makes his ruling based upon the law. The case is over, or the issue of foreclosure is over. If, in fact, that's not the case, and they actually end up having to go to trial to determine some facts, at that point in time, the court would have a trial and panel a jury potentially, and they would determine what the facts are, and the court would advise them what the law is, and they would make a determination. Once that occurs, if the plaintiff is successful in his foreclosure, he will get what is called a final judgment, which will do several things. It will, one, tell the parties that the foreclosure has been entered. It will, two, direct me to sell that piece of property in a courthouse on a certain date and time. And three, it will tell me how to disperse the proceeds of the sale. So once that's done, we begin an advertisement process.
That's right.
Where we advertise it through a local newspaper or a paper, which is authorized by statute. Actually, we're here at the Naples Daily News. We advertise some of them through the Naples Daily News, but that's we let the parties call that. There's other newspapers that are also used. And once all of that is done, we have a sale on the third floor of the courthouse where people actually come in and bid on these properties. It happens about 11 o'clock on most days, every week.
Every week, yep.
Yep. So you can come in and see how it works and observe what happens. And what happens is we tell people what the property is. We tell them that we're fixing to sell it, give them at least some of the legal description, if not all of it, depending upon what rolls out. And at that point in time, the bidding begins. Generally, and has nothing to do with anything other than this is generally the way it happens here in Collier County, the plaintiff or the plaintiff's representative, the person who has the judgment holder or a judgment holder's representative, will come in and bid generally $100. I mean, it's amazing how many of them they bid $100.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that person's fixing to get that piece of property for $100. What they're doing is they're getting the property, and they have a judgment, so they're just applying their judgment against that bid price.
Bid price, that's right.
Right. And at that point in time, other people then will begin bidding, and they can bid or they can't bid. Some of them, some of the properties are, nobody bids on them because the value of the property is much higher than the debt, or much lower than the debt.
Much lower, right.
Yeah. And then there are some in which people bid on, and they buy them, and we will take the name of the bidder that was the highest, and at that point in time, we will then enter a certificate of sale, which is done when we sell the property. A period of time then passes for everybody to object and do all of these wonderful things, and at that point in time, we will send out a proposed distribution of proceeds, which will tell everybody, this is how we are planning to distribute the proceeds from the sale. And if anybody objects, you need to raise that objection now. Nobody objects. We issue, after a period of time, we will issue what's called a certificate of title, which is basically serves the same function as a deed. Okay. Now, let's talk about the problems with this process.
Before we do that,
Okay.
let's just take a little short break and
Okay.
we'll discuss that. We'll
Sure.
be back in 1 minute. Thank you.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Fry Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back. Mr. Brock, let's talk about the pitfalls, because there are some pitfalls in buying a foreclosure property.
Yes, they are.
The one thing you didn't mention is that people can't really get a mortgage when they buy a foreclosure. They really need cash, right? At the sale and proceeds the next day, right?
When you come to the sale, the highest bidder at the point in time of the end of the sale has to put a down payment. I
Right.
think that down payment's either 5 or 10%.
That's right.
Okay, and once you do that, that is forever lost, and you have to come back the next morning in the foreclosures and pay the balance
By 10 o'clock or 11
by 10 o'clock.
Right.
And
You're flexible in an hour, right?
well, I mean, actually we
Are you?
aren't if you don't let us know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not playing that game, but if you've
Right.
got a legitimate reason, I listen to your reasons. Okay, I mean, I'm not trying to
No, I know what you mean. Right.
deal with anybody, but you have to pay for that, both your deposit and the balance.
That's right.
Has to be paid in guaranteed funds, or you can have a deposit in my
Account.
account on your behalf that you can use.
And that qualifies you as a registered
That-
bidder, right?
That qualifies you as a registered bidder at the beginning of the process. And as you go through this process, the purpose for the down payment is to a certain extent, I guess, allow you to go make sure that you don't want to give me more money than just the down payment. Okay? But here's the problem that you've got to be cognizant of. Foreclosure actions, you remember me talking to you about you want to make sure that everybody's name
That's right.
that has an interest in that property is named in that foreclosure action? Well, if it's not, okay, they're not bound by any of the proceeds, so they could come back after the fact. In addition to that, a second mortgage holder could in fact foreclose on a piece of property. And it's not going to wipe out the first mortgage holder if their first mortgage holder is not named.
Okay, right.
Let me give you a real life scenario that I had to deal with. I had a gentleman buy a piece of property, give me a deposit, a very substantial deposit, gave me a bank check for it. We ran the bank check through banking channels. It came back to me non-payment. So I called the bank and asked them why they had stopped payment on the check. And they told me, well, the person they had sold it to came to me and told me that, or came to them and told them that he had lost the check. To which I responded to the bank, well, chances are pretty good that he did lose it. But he lost it through the process of negotiating it to the clerk.
Right.
Right. But the bank ultimately made it good. They came back and made it good. But you can see what the problem is. You can lose your money.
That's right.
Because what in fact this person had bought, as opposed to it being an asset,
Liability.
it was a liability.
Right.
Because the first mortgage exceeded the amount that he had paid for the property.
Right. Yeah, you can't be an amateur buying this.
No,
Right. So, right.
Foreclosures are not something for the weak at heart or the amateurs.
That's right.
You know, you need to know what you're doing or have someone who has the capability of doing the research for you to protect you. Now, you could get somebody to do a title search, and here's the problem with that. I have foreclosure sales canceled by the courts right up to the time that we're fixing to sell them.
Do you really?
Yeah, so you can go out and spend money to have the property searched, the title on it searched, and nothing ever happened. Somebody come in and settle with a bank, and you're just out the money. That's the downside. You just have to know what you're doing, and you have to be careful.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good overview with that. Let's start into tax deeds, because that's something that a lot of people are asking about, how they can purchase tax deeds and what the procedure on that is.
Right. Okay, every year if you own property in Collier County, you get a tax bill from the tax collector. Okay, you have to pay it by a certain date, and if you don't, and I noticed just recently you received in the newspaper
right.
a big list of all of the people that hadn't paid their property taxes. Well, if you ultimately do not pay your property taxes for this year, the tax collector is going to sell what is called a tax certificate on that property. Okay, and that's where people haven't paid and people are buying the certificate, and they're never going to get the property through that certificate.
Right.
But that's an investment process. Now you have to remember that the tax certificate and sale process is a non-judicial process. Okay? It is an administrative process that the tax collector sells the tax certificate. And then after 2 years, if the person whose property that certificate is applicable to does not pay the taxes and all of the fees associated therewith. That property can be forced by that certificate holder to sell. When it goes to sale, the tax collector then submits to the clerk's office that certificate as being forced to sell with all of the named lien holders.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a sale, just like we do in the foreclosure cases.
Right.
It's different. In a tax deed sale, one of the things that's unique about the tax deed sale is that tax deed sale cuts off all liens or encumbrances on that property, except for government liens of record. Only thing that survives, it'll cut off a first mortgage.
Okay.
Okay?
But not the water bill.
But it won't cut off the water bill.
Right.
It won't cut off a federal tax lien. It
Right.
won't cut off government liens of record.
Okay.
But other than that, it'll cut off everything else. So that's a distinct difference between tax deeds and foreclosures. So you don't have as much jeopardy in that tax deed as you have in that foreclosure sale.
So let me just explain. You explain this a little bit. You know, you have a tax deed sale, okay, and there's $1,000 owed, okay, from 2 years back, and then there's a guy that maybe bought the 1 year too, right?
Okay.
Okay. And then I come in and want to start the bid. Okay, I can go up to $1,200 or $1,300.
Well, you're going to start in the tax deed sale. There is a minimum bid,
There's a minimum bid.
which is the taxes
Uh-huh.
plus all of the fees associated with this process. And that is where the bidding begins.
And
And it can go up from that. It can't go down.
What would be the chances of somebody getting to buy that versus the person that holds that tax certificate?
They would be equal
Equal
at the sale.
at the sale.
Right.
Okay.
But anytime prior to that sale, you can go over to the tax collector's office and redeem those certificates.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you can go over as the property owner
Right.
and pay them off.
Pay them off.
Right. You could do the same thing if you didn't own the property.
Right.
The only problem would be when you paid them off, it would still be the property of the original owner.
Mm-hmm.
But believe me, we've had that happen
You've had that happen.
with closely related corporations.
Okay, and then how often are those tax sale deeds?
Well, nowhere near like
No,
foreclosure sales.
that's right.
I mean, for example, we have, let's see, here it is, tax deed applications and sales. We have like 154 a year.
A year?
Yep. They're held 1 day a week, some weeks.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay, you can go to my website
And see all this.
and see all of that information, all of the properties that we are going to sell in the tax deed. You can do the same thing with foreclosures.
That's right.
You can go in there and see all of the foreclosure cases that we are going to, in which we have an outstanding judgment to sell it.
That's right.
Right.
And some of those sales get canceled too,
Right.
right? They're settled or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Well,
They get settled, the tax deeds get settled
Right.
by remission through, or not remission, maybe it is, but going over to the tax collector and paying them off.
paying them off.
Right. Right.
Okay, and that, before we close this up here, just give our viewers a little overview of your website, what you can get on the website, and you can pay a lot of fees or bills on the website too, right?
Right. You can pay, if you get a traffic ticket, you can pay the traffic ticket with the credit card. I have taken the position that the taxpayer is not going to eat the fee that the credit card company makes me pay for your convenience of using the credit card. So you have to pay a convenience fee associated with using that credit card. But certainly beats having to drive
and wait in
over
line.
here.
Right.
You can get all of the information with regard to the cases. We actually have our court cases now are all electronic. When I took over in 1992, there was no such thing.
Right.
But all of our court cases now are electronic, and you can get them off of the web. There are some that the Florida Supreme Court will not allow us to show you. There's some information there that is confidential or sealed, which we have redacted, whether it's by statute or court order. You're not going to be able to tell that, but you just know you're not going to be able to see it. There are certain types of cases, like divorce cases. Now, this is strange to me, but this is reality, because the Supreme Court won't let me put them on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see them at home,
Right.
but you can come down to my office and use my computers in my office and see them.
See them.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, I don't make the rules, I just follow them.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you want to know something about what the Board of County Commissioners has done, you can go in there, all of the ordinances are there, all of the minutes, and they are verbatim minutes of what the Board of County Commissioners have said in their meetings. So if there is any particular night in which you find yourself not able to sleep, if you just turn that on for a little while, I suspect you'll go right to sleep.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Brock, for coming on.
Not a problem. I love it, Mr. York.
Next year,
But
maybe.
one of the things that I would like to point out to people,
Sure.
you can go to my website,
Mm-hmm.
and in June we're going to have a program on how to navigate my website.
Okay.
Okay, and then in the fall, when all of our visitors get back, we will start running the entire cycle again. So pay attention to the website, and you can learn how to deal with evictions, file evictions,
File liens.
file small claims cases.
Small claims, sorry.
You can figure out how to deal with traffic infractions and things like that. We have a whole series of them. My objective is to try to teach people how to go through the process themselves in these small little actions. You don't have to hire an attorney to do it. So, if you're intelligent enough that and feel comfortable enough, you can do it yourself, then we're going to give you the information how. I can't, even though I'm an attorney,
Right.
I can't give you legal advice. So everything that I give you generally is from a general perspective. But I give you a lot of information through the process. It's a 2-hour program, each one of them, where we go through the process for 2 hours. We are here to help the public. My staff and I fully believe that we're a service provider for the general public, and if we don't provide that service, we don't have a reason for being. If you ever need any help, I promise you, I answer my phone myself.
Oh, I know you do, yeah.
If I don't answer it, if I'm doing something else, I will call you back, and if I don't call you back, you can know for a fact that something has gone awry and you need to get back in touch with me, because I believe that we're there for the service of the public.
Mhm. Well, thank you very much, Mr.
You're
Brock,
welcome.
and I hope you come on again next year and give us a little
Not a
update.
problem. Be
Okay.
glad to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.